December 1st. While Christmas lights were being switched on in many American cities, children were nibbling on the first chocolate pieces from their advent calendars, and radio stations were playing Jingle Bells on repeat. A door opened in an inconspicuous courthouse in Volusia County to reveal something completely different, a nightmare that had unfolded behind a suburban front door. For Angela Stold, that first day of December was no festive day. It was the beginning of her trial, a trial that was not about a simple crime, but about a story that had left even experienced investigators stunned. A story full of pain, isolation, and a murder so cruel in its execution that it was hard to believe it had been committed by a mother of two children. Angela Stold was born in Bangkok on April 7th. Her childhood was marked by uniforms, rules, and constant moving. Her father was in the military. Her mother organized family life with a firm hand. Discipline was expected. Emotions were suppressed. Angela grew up in an environment where order meant everything, but love, closeness, and genuine security rarely shone through. She stood out early on because of her reserved nature. She spoke little and hardly played with other children. Her younger sister Esther was more lively and open, and a rift developed between the two at an early age. Angela often felt neglected, then responsible when her parents went on business trips. She had to look after Esther, even though she was still a child herself. This responsibility weighed heavily on her. Her loneliness grew, as did her distrust of other people. When she was a teenager, her father was dismissed from the service. The family moved to Florida to the small town of Deltona. There, at the age of 15, Angela met a young man, 3 years older, charming, loud, exciting. For her, it was the first attention she had ever received that didn't feel like control. She fell in love. The relationship developed quickly, too quickly. Soon she moved in with him and they got married, but what seemed like a new beginning turned out to be a repetition of old patterns. The man was not loving, he was controlling and violent. Angela told her family that he treated her like a prisoner. He beat her, humiliated her, and repeatedly threatened to kill her. Some time passed in which she lived between fear and hope. Finally, she left him. She was 20, already scarred, both inside and out. Shortly thereafter, she married again. She had her first child with her second husband, but the happiness was fleeting. Angela became mentally ill, anxiety disorder, depression, diagnoses that weighed heavily because they did not come alone. Angela was born without a thyroid gland, which meant lifelong treatment with hormones and medication. The pills made her tired, sluggish, often unable to get out of bed. Her marriage broke down and she was left with a small child. Without education, without a job, without prospects. In her desperation, she came up with a plan. She would find a man who could support her financially. Her motivation was not love, but survival. At 25, she married for the third time. This marriage produced another daughter. The family moved to Volusia County to a house with a garden, on a quiet street with palm trees and a picture-perfect suburban idyll. At first, everything worked out. Angela tried hard to be a good mother. She kept the house clean, took care of the children's schooling, and even tried to strike up conversations with the neighbors. But the medication she had to take had side effects. She suffered from panic attacks with increasing frequency. She became suspicious, erratic, and sometimes lost her sense of direction. But she fought on. She didn't want to give up. Angela had an unusual hobby. She collected weapons. Her house was full of them, decorative rifles, old pistols, modern handguns. Most of them weren't loaded, but she had enough ammunition to change that at any time. Some people found this disturbing, but in Florida it was completely normal. In 2006, James Schieffer moved in across the street with his family. He was a strong man with a friendly smile who worked as a limousine driver. His partner, Candy Medina, had been living with him for 17 years. They had 2 children together, plus a third from Candy's previous relationship. The children soon started playing with Angela's children, and the families became friends. They helped each other with shopping, barbecued together in the garden, and organized outings. James was funny, reliable, someone who seemed like a rock to the outside world. Angela appreciated him, perhaps more than she wanted to admit. But while the picture looked like a new beginning on the outside, things continued to simmer inside her. Her marriage was on shaky ground. When her third husband finally left her, Angela was alone again, with 2 children, no education, growing debts, and her nerves in tatters. She asked family and friends for money, but it wasn't enough. The mountain of debt grew, and then James came up with a proposal that would change everything. James's proposal was unusual and risky. He had problems with social services, he explained, and suggested that Angela be registered as his beneficiary for his disability payments. The monthly amount, $1,130. He promised to give her $100 of that every month. For him, it meant more security in the bureaucratic jungle. For her, a small ray of hope in an increasingly bleak everyday life. Angela hesitated. It sounded like fraud, like something that could have consequences. But James assured her that it was common practice and that no one would ever ask about it. And he was persistent. He brought it up again and again until she finally gave in. They drove to the social welfare office together, signed forms, went to the bank, and opened a joint account. James had a check dated in advance and deposited into the new account. Everything seemed organized, almost professional. Angela felt uncomfortable, but she told herself it's only for a few months. Just until I get back on my feet. But it soon became clear that James had no intention of keeping his end of the bargain. He regularly overdrew the account. Angela tried to stop him, talked to him, asked him to be more careful. But James had long since gained access to the card details and secretly withdrew money, often more than was allowed, month after month. She watched as the account emptied and the debts piled up. And yet she remained silent, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of dependence. At first, James continued to pay the promised $100, but then his problems began. The social services became suspicious and started withholding part of his payments. His financial situation worsened dramatically. Several months' rent was unpaid. He was facing eviction. He became more nervous, restless, and aggressive in his tone. Arguments became more frequent. He demanded that Angela help him. He told her to ask her father for $4,000, as if it were a matter of course. But Angela refused. Her father was old and sick. She didn't want to drag him into this chaotic situation. The relationship between the 2 neighbors, once friendly and familiar, began to sour. What had once seemed like help now felt like blackmail. James put Angela under increasing pressure, became loud, accused her of abandoning him. For Angela, it was déjà vu. Once again, a man who dominated her, who demanded things, who knew no boundaries. In April 2013, Angela decided to stop the advance payment service for their joint checks. She wanted out of this before things escalated. She had no idea that it was already too late. Early in the morning on April 3rd, she picked James up from work as agreed. Her children were in the back seat. She took them all home. The children went to bed. Angela and James stayed in the kitchen. They had a drink and talked quietly. It was about money, as always, about what she could still get from her father, about what James needed. Angela had prepared something she could hardly explain to herself. She had taken a medication from her father's house, a sedative. She knew that it was powerful when combined with alcohol. It made you sleepy and paralyzed. Maybe she just wanted James to stop talking. Maybe she wanted to calm him down for a few hours, maybe even longer. She secretly mixed the drug into his drink. James soon realized that he wasn't feeling well. He felt dizzy and lost his concentration. Angela suggested they get some fresh air. She put him in the car and drove off to the cemetery. There, between the graves, she stopped. The scene was eerie. Thick fog lay over the grounds. The trees cast long shadows under the light of the street lamps. James sat dazed in the passenger seat. Angela stared out the windshield. Then she told him she had quit the advance payment service. James exploded. Despite his dazed state, he started yelling, pounding his fist on the dashboard, grabbing her arm. He demanded the money, right now. He threatened her, loudly, directly, just like she knew he would, just like she never wanted to experience again. Angela reached behind her into a box of camping equipment. She had thought there was a screwdriver in there, but what she held in her hand was an ice pick. Without thinking, she stabbed him, right in the eye. James screamed, jerked, and lashed out, but he didn't stop. She reached behind her again, this time for a cable. She threw it around his neck and pulled tight. He gasped, struggled, and fell silent. Silence. Only her breathing. Her pulse was pounding like a sledgehammer. Then she stabbed him again in the other eye. Angela sat in the car, her hands shaking. Next to her lay a lifeless, faceless body, its face covered in blood. The ice pick lay between the seats, the cable still wrapped around his neck. She had done what she never thought she could do, and now she didn't know what to do next. For a moment, she thought about going to the police, confessing everything, saying it was self-defense, that she just wanted to survive. But her thoughts raced. Would anyone believe her? Her, the mentally ill, twice-divorced woman with 2 children, who took medication, collected weapons, and had just killed a man? Or would they think she was a danger to her children, to society? She decided against it. No police. Instead, she grabbed a roll of plastic wrap she had bought at a discount store a few days earlier for garden waste, as she had told the cashier at the time. She carefully wrapped James's head, layer by layer, not to protect him, but to keep her car from getting dirty. Then she drove off, back home. Her hands clenched the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on the road. Her children were asleep upstairs, unaware. It was late, almost 3 in the morning. She parked the car in the garage. The air smelled of gasoline, metal, old sweat. Angela pulled James's body onto a plastic sheet, inch by inch, with great effort. She wasn't strong, her back ached, but she had no choice. She went into the house and fetched a kitchen knife, then a saw, tools she usually used for crafts, for repairing old furniture. Now there was a dead body lying on the tarp. She started with the legs, cut through flesh, tendons, bones. It took hours. The floor was bloody. Her clothes were soaked. She worked as if in a daze, mechanically, without a plan. Just keep going, keep going. Finally, she carried the pieces into the kitchen, opened the oven. She didn't know exactly why she was doing it. Perhaps she believed that heat could destroy everything. That fire would eliminate what was otherwise indestructible. But when the oven began to smoke and a foul, acrid smell spread through the house, she realized that this was not a solution. It was a mistake. So on to plan B. She put pots on the stove, poured water into them, and added the body parts, like a macabre soup. She stuffed other parts into garbage bags and wrapped them in newspapers. The next day, she drove her children to the forest, supposedly to dispose of a dead deer she had accidentally run over. The children, unaware, helped carry the body. It was a sunny day. Birds were chirping, and between the trees, human remains disappeared into the undergrowth. Back home, Angela cleaned the oven, burned clothes, and hid the murder weapon in the shed. But the smell remained. It settled in the walls, in the carpets, in her hair. Her daughter asked her what it was. Angela replied, "A dead rat in the oven." But she knew that wouldn't last long. Meanwhile, Candy, James's partner, was waiting at home for news. James hadn't shown up for his next job. He had supposedly driven a customer to Tampa during the night, but after that there was radio silence. Candy tried to call him, no answer. Finally, she reported him missing. The police took the report seriously. An adult man suddenly disappeared, no message, no sign of life. It was suspicious. The officers issued a public missing persons report. James's photo was published, 5'11", 265 pounds, brown eyes, brown hair, several distinctive tattoos, including the word gringo on his neck and a skull with the Metallica logo on his calf. His family was convinced he would never just disappear. Not without his children. Not without a word. The police began investigating his professional environment. They found his car, parked undamaged, on the premises of the limousine company. No signs of a struggle, no evidence of a crime. His boss, Pitt Harrington, seemed at a loss. Even a mechanic, John, who had last seen James, could not provide any new information, except that James had been addicted to gambling and had debts. The investigation came to nothing. And in the meantime, Angela began to cover her tracks. She drove to nearby parks and buried James's cell phone and driver's license under trees. She threw pots, knives, and plastic items into public trash containers. A doormat, soaked in something she didn't want to name, ended up in a lake. But with each passing day, the pressure grew. She slept poorly and had nightmares. She stopped taking her medication for fear of appearing even more dazed. But this only exacerbated her symptoms: paranoia, delusions, feelings of guilt. Again and again she believed she saw James in her house, that he was back, that he was talking. Her mind began to break down, and then on April 20th, the moment came when the facade finally cracked. On April 20th, Esther, Angela's younger sister, called 911. Her voice was nervous, trembling, but determined. She said that Angela had been acting strange for days, that she seemed confused, talking about investigations, about a serious guilt, that she had hinted at wanting to take her own life, and that she had, in Esther's words, done something terrible. The police responded immediately. Officers were sent to Angela's house, accompanied by a mobile psychiatric service. Angela opened the door barefoot, her face gaunt with dark circles under her eyes. She let the officers in, but hardly spoke. She answered questions evasively or not at all. When asked to sit down, she just nodded and stared silently ahead. Her gaze was empty. A paramedic assessed her condition as mentally unstable with suicidal tendencies. She was taken to a psychiatric clinic for observation. Angela began to talk in the ambulance, confused, fragmented, but with recurring terms: guilt, corpse, fire, forest. While Angela was under observation, the police obtained a search warrant. The next morning, a team of investigators entered her house. What they found left even the most experienced among them speechless. The walls were painted with strange symbols, pentagrams, crosses, garbled words in red felt-tip pen. In one of the bedrooms lay crumpled prayer shawls, religious figures, and candle stubs. On a table lay an open notebook with illegible entries. In the living room, there were piles of unopened mail, empty medicine bottles, and used syringes. And in the kitchen, the place where it all supposedly began, there was still a strange smell. A mixture of cleaning products, ash, and something else. Something rotten. In the oven, investigators found pieces of tissue. On the stove, a burnt pot with black residue. Next to the sink, a saw with teeth stuck together with a dark substance. On the garage floor, they discovered pale, dried bloodstains that had been doused with cleaning products, but only superficially. The officers photographed everything, secured evidence. None of it was proof of a crime, not yet. But it was enough to question Angela again. At the psychiatric clinic, she was initially uncooperative, silent, apathetic, seemingly absent. But then, after several days, something broke inside her. She asked for paper, for a pen, and she began to write. She wrote about James, about the conversations, about the money, about the ice pick, about the cable, about the forest, about the fire. Everything was there, disordered, chaotic, but real. It was not a clear confession, but rather a feverish dream of memories, guilt, and fear. The police took her statement seriously. They began checking the locations Angela had mentioned. In a remote wooded area near DeLand, they came across several garbage bags buried under a layer of leaves and earth. Inside, human bones, a thigh bone, a kneecap, several ribs. In another bag, items of clothing, a shirt with the logo of a limousine company, a pair of pants, socks. An initial forensic examination confirmed that these were human remains. DNA samples were taken. That same week, confirmation came it was James Schieffer. Angela was officially arrested without bail. The news hit like a bombshell. The media reported with headlines such as, "Mother dismembers neighbor," "Florida woman cooked corpse on stove." Neighbors gave interviews saying Angela had always been strange, but never aggressive. Others shook their heads, saying she had been a good mother. No one had expected anything like this. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. Angela led the officers to other locations: a park, a pond, a trash can behind a shopping center. There they found James's driver's license, his shattered cell phone, plastic bags with tissue remnants. She stated that she had deliberately replaced the cell phone's battery several times to make it appear active, to make it seem as if James was still alive. The forensic expert confirmed that the bones matched the DNA. However, the cause of death could not be determined conclusively. The material was too fragmented and destroyed. The skull was never found. The upper body was missing. But with the confession, the locations where the remains were found, and the sisters' statements, there was enough evidence to press charges. Angela was charged with second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and mistreatment of a corpse. And it was precisely this case that came to court on December 1st, almost exactly 8 months after the crime. A case in which no one knew whether the truth would ever come to light. The courtroom was simple, almost austere. There was no room for drama, and yet there was an oppressive tension in the air. The public gallery was filled to capacity with reporters, relatives, and curious onlookers. Everyone wanted to see who this woman was who had allegedly dismembered her neighbor and cooked him in her own oven. Angela Stold entered the courtroom dressed in black, with straight dark hair and large angular glasses. She appeared calm, too calm, some observers later said. Her gaze did not wander around the room. It was directed inward. The trial began on December 1st, 2014. The charges were second-degree murder, disturbing the peace of the dead, and tampering with evidence. But that was to change before the end of the first week of the trial. The lead prosecutor accused Angela of acting out of greed. James's monthly check for $1,230 was her motive, according to the indictment. The joint account was just a front. Angela had actually decided long ago to get rid of James. The fact that she had bought plastic wrap and rubber gloves hours before the crime was seen as evidence of planning and intent. The prosecution also presented witness statements. Her sister Esther, who reported Angela's strange behavior, and her 17-year-old daughter, who spoke of a strange smell in the house that was supposedly coming from a dead rat in the oven. But later, her mother confessed to her in tears that she had killed James because he had threatened to kill her and the children. Angela herself took the stand. Her voice was calm but fragile. She repeatedly addressed the jury directly. She told them about the threats, about the night at the cemetery, about the panic when James grabbed her. She said she thought he was going to strangle her, the way he had been shouting and harassing her. She reached for an object, in a box full of camping equipment, thinking it was a screwdriver, but it was an ice pick. It all happened in seconds. "I didn't want to kill him," she said. "I just wanted to stop him." She described how he continued to attack her despite her initial injury, how she found the cable and squeezed it in a moment of pure panic. She was afraid for her children, afraid that she would lose them if she went to the police. That's why she tried to solve everything herself. The prosecution did not accept this. They showed a video from the interrogation room. In it, Angela says that after James was dead, she picked up the ice pick again and stabbed him in the other eye. A cruel act, one that was difficult to explain as self-defense. Angela said in court that she could not remember it. "Sometimes dreams and reality get mixed up," she whispered. "I don't know anymore what really happened." The cross-examination became tougher. The prosecution pointed out how often Angela had lied. To the investigators when she said she last saw James on April 5th. To Candy Medina, who assured her he knew nothing about the disappearance. To the children she took to the woods to bury a deer. "You didn't just kill him," said the prosecutor. "You then tried to make him disappear piece by piece. How could that have been an accident?" Angela didn't cry. She didn't look at anyone. It was as if she was just waiting for it to be over. The mood in the courtroom shifted. What had initially seemed like a tragic misunderstanding began to appear like a cruel act, a planned murder, cleverly concealed, and yet doubts remained. Her children seemed sincere. Her sister appeared genuinely shaken. Many wondered, was she the perpetrator or the victim of a system that left her alone? At the end of the 5th week of the trial, it was clear. The charges would be upgraded. Second-degree murder became first-degree murder, premeditated, planned, brutally executed. The turning point had been reached. Angela Stold, 42 years old, thrice divorced, mother of 2 children, was now officially considered a dangerous murderer. But the verdict had not yet been handed down, and what was still missing was James's head, and a clear answer to the question, why? The jury retired to deliberate. 8 men, 4 women. For 22 days they had heard witnesses, seen expert reports, watched videos, read statements. Now the decision was theirs. Angela sat motionless in the dock. Her gaze was fixed on nothing. No trembling, no sobbing, only silence. The jury took just under 3 hours. When they returned, everything happened quickly. The judge entered the courtroom, sat down, and asked the jury foreman to read the verdict. A tense, almost fragile silence filled the room. No one whispered, no one moved. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, tampering with evidence, desecration of a corpse." Angela showed no reaction, no nodding, no breakdown. Not even when the bailiff approached her and handcuffed her. She seemed as if her body was still present, but her mind was elsewhere. The judge read out the sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 15 years for handling the corpse, and another 5 years for deliberately concealing the crime. A final verdict. No room for interpretation, no room for pity. Angela Stold left the courtroom in silence. Reactions were divided. Some spectators expressed sympathy, not for the crime, but for the woman who, due to her illness, may no longer have been able to distinguish between right and wrong. Others were outraged. "Anyone could have reported it," said a former neighbor, "but she chose to cook him." Candy's family was relieved. They had waited months for answers, for justice. But the pain remained. James's head was never found. Neither was his upper body. What exactly happened in the car that night will probably remain unclear forever. Investigators later said that without Angela's statements, they would never have been able to track down the crime. Everything was too fragmented, literally and emotionally. "Without her confession," said one official, "we would never have known what happened to James." Angela's children were never charged. The prosecution saw no evidence that they knew what they were carrying into the woods. For them, as Angela said, it was a dead deer, a story she told them, a lie she planted in their heads to protect them or to save herself. What remains is a case that stands out even among Florida's numerous true crime stories, not only because of its brutality, but because of its absurdity, its tragedy, its incomprehensibility. A woman, mentally unstable, a multiple failure, deeply overwhelmed, meets a man with debts, addictions, and his own demons. Whether it was self-defense or murder may never be known with certainty. But one thing is certain: December 1st, 2014 marked not only the beginning of Angela Stold's trial, but also a glimpse into the depths of an everyday life that had long since fallen apart, long before the first blood was shed. After the verdict, Angela Stold was transferred to the high-security Lowell Correctional Institution, a cold, sprawling facility in central Florida, surrounded by high walls, watchtowers, and double steel gates. There, in a cell without mirrors or personal belongings, she began her life sentence. There was no appeal, no interview, no public statements. According to her file, she underwent several psychiatric evaluations in the weeks following the trial. The report spoke of emotional numbness, deep-seated anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic symptoms. One expert wrote, "Ms. Stoll does not seem to deny what happened, but she is also unable to process it." Another, "Her relationship with reality is fragile. What she perceives as self-protection is interpreted by outsiders as cold-bloodedness." The case faded from public view more quickly than might have been expected. After the initial media shock, there were no further details, no revelations, no sensational interviews. Perhaps because no one knew what to make of the story. It was not easy to tell. It was too complex, too sad, too real. In internet forums, some speculated that Angela herself was a victim of abuse, of neglect, of society. Others called her a monster, proof that madness and brutality often lurk behind the most inconspicuous facades. A few spoke of how quickly poverty, mental instability, and social isolation can become deadly.